It was already frigid on Thanksgiving Day, but nothing could have predicted how cold I would feel. My sister gestured toward the garage and claimed to be accustomed to crumbs that she didn't whisper it, and instead of flinching, she simply gave me a plate of paper and turned away, and entered her ideal dining room, where the family's other members were sitting beneath golden lights already, and I stayed there looking at the shining chandeliers for a second. My children are clutching that fragile plate. Micah and Illa, who are 12 and 9 behind me. Neither of them said. They simply watched me, anticipating what would happen next. And I was unable to cry in front of, not after all that we've already done. Been through, so I led them with a smile. Via the side entrance and into the scent of gasoline and dust filled the garage. They pushed one folding table, a pair of metal chairs against the wall, and a box of cardboard to rest on. No decorations, no coziness, only quiet, and the scratching sound of plastic with forks. We had our Thanksgiving meal there. My kids sat through supper without complaining, with their eyes and backs straight. Focused on their meal, Illa gave her a gentle prod. Using her fork, Micah moved the potato pie around, gritted his teeth as he usually does when I was trying not to cry at the time. Felt a change, but I wasn't upset, was no longer hurt. I simply glanced at them, and I realized I had finished pleading with Belong, and a dark thing then. Outside the house, the limousine rolled up. Everyone inside a limousine. Not a car stopped, allowing me to see their silhouettes. The window curtains are odd and perplexing, swarming in the direction of the main door. However, the vehicle continued beyond the front. The driver went around to the garage door. The engine stopped at the door, and a woman wore a navy outfit and stepped out tall and gorgeous. Blue coat. That appeared pricey, even. She glanced around from a distance, and, as clear as day, "I'm trying to find the proprietor of this residence." And as I stood, their faces fell. I hadn't anticipated when visiting my sister's home to last Thanksgiving. I told myself would be the final instance, but the children inquired, "Will Aunt Veronica will my grandmother remember my name? Time?" Then I realized that I was baking and ironing a used dress cornmeal in our tiny kitchen while attempting to pretend that everything was normal. We reside in a small 2-bedroom house. The apartment on the outskirts of town isn't much, but it's warm, clean, and packed with love. I put in long hours as a pediatric clinic receptionist, and I find work as a freelance writer on the It Leaves. Little time or money on the side. As extras, but my children don't gripe. Mike is 12 years old, and they have never had him. Taller than I am, possessing silent strength and ILA's 9, and still have contemplative eyes. Thinks the world is generally good, yet I see that belief faltering a bit. More year in the morning of on Thanksgiving, I stood before the mirror attempting. To determine whether my old boots, I told myself that I looked decent enough. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. Completing it for my children. But the reality is, I still had a part of me that wanted to see my Veronica, her sister, resides in a gated neighborhood where even the garbage cans appear. Rich, her home is large, and chilly. That has a lemon polish scent, and other scents you should avoid touching her husband. Blake is, as my mother likes to say, a polished and arrogant lawyer, always has something and a Bluetooth in his ear, contemptuous remarks regarding public schools, 3 children, nannies, and Range Rover is not a housekeeper. Talk a lot of English, Veronica, and I not been in close proximity since we were. She was always the one with teenagers. Flawless hair, flawless scores, flawless. I was the creative one in every way, who made notes in notebooks and possessed possibilities, but didn't quite succeed when I arrived at her driveway. The gathering was, I could hear it already in full swing. Giggling from the backyard and the dishes clattering in the open windows, I inhaled and looked too. The children nodded, and you two were ready. She was holding the sweet potato pie, assisted me in getting Micah to say, "Let's make it stop." I knocked once and entered, but no one approached the door. It was always the same me, and they never did going in as a visitor to my own family's gathering. Elaine, my mother, hardly raised her head from she was sitting with her glass of Chardonnay. Watching from the couch's edge, Veronica's children performed a dance. Saying, "Hi, Ma," in the living room, I put the pie on the counter and said, blinked at me, gave me a hazy smile, and turned, returning her focus to her granddaughters. Her words, "Oh, you look tired," came in that she acts as though it's a concern, but it's judgment in a velvet dress, actually. From the kitchen, Veronica emerged in too high of heels for someone making a mess. "Oh, you brought something," she said. Potatoes murmured, glancing at the adorable Blake pie. Passed with a glass of something in hand. "Hey, Cal," he said, adopting the nickname. Kids appear so big, and we weren't given. We weren't given drinks at the seats. There was no greeting or self-help. Show no affection, my cousins were all. They were chatting and passing wine. Appetizers from a hand with a manicure to the other, and soon I was standing there, grinning in a corner with my two children past the discomfort, as I usually do. Illa muttered, "May I give my pie?" I nodded, and she approached and grasped. My mother gave it to me as if she were giving. My mother looked at her as a treasure, looked at it for a half-second and uttered, "Oh, how charming, sweet potato." That's when I was aware that I had erred, but it was too late to depart from dinner. Served, so I thought perhaps we'd at least sit down at the table for only 1 hour. I convinced myself that I could put up with anything for. After an hour, Veronica entered the holding room. Her eyes caught a stack of paper plates. I swear she grinned at mine, and she spoke loudly. "A little short on space," as if she were telling everyone about it, room. "So I've prepared something for you all." I didn't realize in the garage at first. "The garage," I said nearly again. Thinking it was some strange prank, I laughed. She gave a grave nod, saying, "Yes, you're accustomed to scraps, correct?" Each and every no one was halted by the talk in the room. Just a single word, and I instantly realized that I was back where I was never welcome. Disregarded and pushed. Away like a stray dog who entered via my children's back door, gazed up at me. Anticipating what I would, I took the paper plates and grinned. I took them from her hands and led them to the "it was frigid" in the garage. Not merely. Despite the fact that it was physically chilly, with a slight breeze passing through the concrete floor and the side door leaking the heat from our footwear, but a location that wasn't emotionally warm, intended to hold individuals, let alone family members. It had an odor of oil, cardboard, and neglect. A collapsible table was positioned next to 2 seats, and a container on the far wall centerpiece, a roll of linen, and no tablecloth. A few cheap utensils and paper towels. And vintage booster seat that belonged to Veronica's children sat quietly in a dusty nook. Micah sat down slowly and seemed insulted, then went up and put a hand on my hand. "Are we going to eat here?" she asked softly. I nodded, and she remained silent. Any additional information just climbed onto placed her elbows on the table and leaned on the crate. Her little dress clumsily gathered beneath. I observed her attempting to smooth things. Out, as if it were important, like someone would observe how I arranged the food. We had been pieces of turkey that are barely warm, green beans with mashed potatoes without gravy, beans that appeared to have been no cranberries, microwaved, in a plastic bag, no bread, no sauce, no second helpings. Nobody. Micah held his fork as he arrived to see how we were doing. Extended period before ultimately stabbing at a turkey piece. "Why did they put us in there?" "Outside?" he asked without glancing at me. Lacked a response. Ila's eyes were shiny, but she blinked quickly in an attempt to brave, "Did we make a mistake?" I gulped. "No, sweetie, you didn't do anything incorrect." "However, we're out here," she added, "and within, feels unrelated to family. I could not breathe, and my chest was constricted. The type of pain that is more a result of fatigue than suffering after years of trying to demonstrate your worth to those who have. You don't count. I've already chosen. I wanted to flip the table and storm back in there. I wanted to toss their fake scream. Show them kindness and let them know precisely what I had assumed, but instead I sensed something as I looked at my kids. I felt ashamed even more, not because I had acted improperly, but because I had allowed it to reach this point, because I had pulled them along, because I'd year after year. I persuaded myself that perhaps things would be different this time. I could arrive and be accepted. Appreciated, since I'd spent my whole life attempting to avoid being a burden by never asking for assistance without taking up too much room, always expressing gratitude, even when the I believed that kindness was a lie if I complied with the regulations provided I grinned enough, kept my mouth shut, and worked hard enough. I would get admitted eventually, but I was still in the garage, and there was more to it than a table. It concerned being informed that you're not a member of the actual family that you belong to. Inconvenience caused by your lack of measure, and witnessing your kids experience that as well, perhaps for the first time. Yet being aware they will never forget that. Micah gazed, eyeing me one more, his jaw clenched. Can we just leave? He wasn't even angry in his voice. Sadly, the number was flat, and in some way that hurt considerably more. So I extended my hand, and we sat there after I gave him a shoulder squeeze, eating quietly while listening to the sounds of glasses clinking and laughter floating in like a terrible echo through the walls. Occasionally, we would hear someone open the refrigerator on the opposite wall or the dishwasher's hum. But nobody came out. I heard no one checked on us. Veronica's laugh is as brilliant and crisp as it originated on a stage, and my mother's gentle response to the "this year's wine" is just excellent. No, not even a phony reference of us. Isla spoke at last. I miss our home, even though Micah said, it's not little. It's sufficient. Additionally, I may have cried at that moment, but instead I grinned. Even though it felt like my face at them might break from suppressing it, I remarked, soon we'll return home, and when we do, we're preparing hot chocolate, and we'll play Monopoly, and we will be appreciative of what we own rather than what people believe we should desire. Both of them nodded, so when I became aware of something I ought to have. This was not my family when I saw it years ago. You are no longer related by blood. Your actions make you and my family members, was still seated directly in front of me. While I began clearing our plates, and as I was getting ready to depart, I couldn't help but take one final look at the house. The headlights then brushed across a long, sleek black automobile in the driveway, arrived silently and slowly. A limousine, not an SUV belonging to a guest or one of Blake's project's customers, a limousine with window tinting, and a Micah, the driver with a cap, peered through the filthy window of the garage door. Is that? We waited when the engine went down, and then, when the rear door opened, a woman emerged, and everything altered. The limousine. The door did not immediately swing open. Slowly and deliberately eased out, like the person inside wasn't rushing, like they were already aware of having everyone's. I stood, drawing attention even from the garage, totally motionless, my hands gripping I hadn't flung the paper plates. Sides. Away. But the children were also frozen. They were aware that this wasn't typical. Saw sporadic limos arrive in peaceful suburban areas on Thanksgiving Day. Micah inclined toward Mom. You can see that I nodded at the window. Suddenly, the home was unnaturally quiet. Through the small piece of glass in the I could just make out the garage door. Shadows behind the living room window heads, changing curtains, and envisioned all of the conversations that took place within. The motorist came to a grinding stop and stepped first out. A tall, pale-gloved, immaculate uniform. Then he spoke to the passenger. Took a step back, opened the door, and then she looked like a woman in her late 60s, tall and beautifully matured in their early 70s, stylishly dressed in a long navy blue wool coat that sounded almost like money. She is genuine, not ostentatious or egotistical. Appeared to be a significant individual, but not the type who had to demonstrate it. She did not make their way to the front door, as everyone anticipated, she turned to face the side gate, after which she proceeded straight. Micah murmured toward the garage. Is she coming here? Hila slowly got to her feet, squeezing me as if she weren't uncertain whether she should feel anxious or happy. The woman paused outside. The eye opened the garage door halfway, and she didn't recoil from the draft or the cold, or the observation of three unfamiliar people with instead use a folding table and paper plates. Excuse me, she murmured with a smile. Soft, serene voice, as if she were simply, while at a bookstore. I'm asking for directions. Searching for this home's owner for... I thought she was referring to Veronica for a while. Perhaps a client or friend of Blake's co-workers, but I had a feeling I swallowed the answer I already knew and responded, That's my sister. She's the woman tipped her head. Inside. And Callie Rivers, you're Callie. She took a slow step forward. You're the right person. When I arrived, the garage was completely quiet. Hila tightened her grip on my fingers, Micah. Stood taller, just as his intuition had beginning, and he wasn't certain if he have to protect me or flee back inside. Hesitantly inquired, Do I know you? She grinned once more, but it held this, time. Something extra, like familiarity. Margot Ellington is my name. Women Forward was founded by me, and we operate mentoring and community outreach initiatives around the state for almost 5 years. Ego, you offered to help you wrote a number of blog posts about shelters, posts that follow, which are honest, lovely, and raw. Written, my eyes grew wide as I recalled because it happened immediately after I left I was staying at a friend's house. Spouse. Children scraping together on the couch, I'd used every cent I could. Volunteering in the evenings at a women's shelter simply to feel productive once more, I'd written about the encounter that wasn't observed. But in order to comprehend it, I put it on a personal blog with a readership of perhaps 20 been reading what you've written ever since. You have a way of making things, she added. People perceive that we need that more now, more than ever. I couldn't believe I simply gazed as she continued. We're put together a series of speakers for I'd like you to attend the national meeting next spring, to serve as our keynote address. All travel-related accommodations, kid care if necessary, and we're providing a publication agreement for your narrative, Callie. Your voice matters and should be heard. Hearing that I didn't respond immediately, I could feel the warmth and the weight of the moment. The incredulity that creeps up my neck, I still had a part of me that believed someone as if she couldn't be present for. Finally, someone like me, Micah, broke the wait in stillness. She wants you to talk, Hila. Looked at me with big, expectant eyes because Margot looked at your writing, and stated, Because your mother is remarkable. And for the first time, after looking for a while, I thought it was true. I couldn't see the home as I turned back toward it. Their faces, but I was certain that they were. I could sense the bewilderment as I watched. The strain and incredulity emanating from all the way from the living room to the garage, and I was pushed out here to keep me tiny. But a limousine had just entered their driveway, and a female was requesting me while wearing a navy coat. Returned to Margot and nodded. Yes, I would be respected, and everything else started to move. Margot contacted her hand, not in some ostentatious, spectacular manner, but with the silent assurance of a person who wasn't merely providing, and she was providing. Respect and an opportunity. Genuine, long overdue respect that I moved forward, wrapping my fingers around near hers, and at that very instant, something, not out of pride, but because I stood higher, out of acknowledgement, the type that only occurs when someone at last notices you for who you are, I'll go get my coat. You won't need it, he murmured, nearly out of breath. We'll take good care of you, she said with a smile. Micah took hold of our leftovers. Illa handed them to her like valuable cargo, hand back into mine, her eyes gleaming like though she were, viewing a film and discovering that her mother was the primary character. We trailed Margot to the limousine, the chilly November breeze sweeping across our faces like a fresh start as we moved. I looked back toward the automobile as I got inside. House, which is when I first noticed them. The dining room's curtains were still open just enough to show the full scene. Veronica was holding a glass of wine. Her lips was slightly open and frozen in her hand, as though she was having trouble processing what she observed Blake hovering behind her. My mother sat by his side with an arm limp. The B.O.B.'s eyes at the end of the table narrowed. Attempting to understand everything, they appeared perplexed rather than outraged, shamed, just astounded, like though the universe had reversed the course of events and gave the individual the spotlight. They had pushed the automobile into the darkness. With a soft thud, the door shut, keeping us inside, into a realm that, for once, seemed to. In mine, the lights were warm, and the seats were cozy. It was quiet and peaceful inside, and Margot talked. To the motorist, via a tiny glass, immediately returned her focus to me, saying, I've made reservations for supper, downtown. Believed that we would talk about the summit, the contract, and the type of assistance you'll necessity for the upcoming months. I gave a nod. I'm still a little shocked. Wow. Yes, Illa muttered. It sounds ideal. Does being famous feel like this? I laughed not in a haughty manner, but with happiness that overflowed before I could stop. I replied, No, baby. This is what it's preferred to be. Micah sat across from us and was respectful. Observing everything, he remained silent. He didn't have to, however, the way At last, his shoulders relaxed, the way he appeared proud rather than defensive, was sufficient. As the limousine emerged from the driveway, I took one last look. The house appeared smaller in the side mirror. Symbolically, but not physically, it didn't seem like I needed it. I wasn't hoping to find a seat at. I wasn't fighting to be a part of that table, of that universe, and I was creating mine. Table, one that my children would never. I wonder if they were accepted. That night's dinner was like something out. Real linen tablecloths from a dream silverware, a basket of warm bread, and waitresses who addressed me as ma'am, as if I was important. But the true magic wasn't in the cuisine or service that was provided in the Margot wanted to hear about my chat. She listened to the entire story without answer, to comprehend rather than to correct. She made notes after I brought up the difficulties of being a single mother. People simply make you feel inadequate. She nodded in agreement as I spoke about surviving, about writing until 2 in the morning, blog entries following the children's bedtime. She grinned as I explained how Isla assisted me in applying color coding to job applications, and how Micah looked up how to pay on Google once. He heard me, so I paid the rent without any money. In the kitchen, sobbing, "We need your voice," she repeated. They believe inspiration must originate from large, luxurious lifestyles, but the peaceful. The most courageous soldiers are those that continue to turn up even when there isn't. When the check arrived, she was observing, "You've already paid enough, so wave it away. Let's take the ride home from here." Was silent, not because there was nothing for us to do. But since peace doesn't mean much, I put Illa to bed after hearing a lot of noise that before I switched off her light at night. I'm happy they included us in the garage. She nodded, and I blinked. Yes, since the limo wouldn't have been aware of our whereabouts. That stopped me. Occasionally, she was correct. You are forced to the periphery in order to discover the route you were destined to take, or I gave her a forehead kiss so it could find you. I've inherited your intelligence from my mother, and in an instant, I realized that they didn't shatter me when they made it public. It has been nearly a year since that for me. Thanksgiving, and I'm still kind of attempting to become the lady I became. Things changed quickly in that garage. such as the phone conversations and emails that began, arriving after Margot's group, declared that I will be the opening speaker for its summit, such as the publication agreement that arrived in my email with the topic line that reads, "Your voice matters." Suddenly, people began to recall my not as the sister of Veronica or Callie is Elaine's daughter, although other modifications were more subdued, such as occur in the interval between heartbeats. When you quit expressing regret for who you are, when you cease to shrink in order to others at ease, when you eventually feel that your narrative doesn't require consent to share the keynote address, was simultaneously lovely and terrible. In front of hundreds of people, I stood on a stage. Of female CEOs, educators, and single mothers, I was honest with the pupils about the garage regarding my children and the years I spent attempting to fit in by being little enough, into a family that would never. I saw strangers weeping as it opened its arms. Women lined up as I saw them nod, later only to express gratitude, for that was me. And I felt more at that precise time, more than I've ever had at home. The book arrived a few months later, Family. I sobbed when we titled it More Than Scraps. I noticed that my name was bolded on the cover, concealed behind or buried in fine print, someone else's name, words, and value. Although the money didn't change anyone's life, the confirmation that Micah began writing as well. He currently maintains a journal, and last week he read me Chairs, a poem he penned. He doesn't talk much, so don't make the table. No longer speak of that Thanksgiving, but I understand that it left a mark, and I believe he's figuring out how to make it positive. Ela remains inquisitive and compassionate at all times. She asked if we could host while she watched. This Thanksgiving, it's just the two of us. She said, friends, no folding chairs. Warm meals, cushions, and couches, so we. Was the living area too tiny for everyone sat down at once, but nobody gave a damn. People laughed while eating on floors and laps. Then there were candles for sharing seconds. Love and music, true love, encircled. Everything is as cozy as a blanket, and nobody questioned why Veronica's and I weren't there. Didn't offer, however. My mother did send a brief message. Just 2 lines that morning. I hope you're. I did, however, occasionally stare at it and miss you. Pause before responding. We're doing. I hope you're doing well too. No rage, no serenity instead of resentment, because here's the lessons I've discovered since that day in the garage. You can try for years to win the affection of those who don't. Know you can show that affection, or you know how to do it. To yourself, and observe the transformation. Walking away has power in everything. Building your own table has power. And occasionally, when you least anticipate it, the globe arrives in a limousine, and simply because they failed to notice your value does not negate its existence. It was, always was, and perhaps going to the garage wasn't. Perhaps it was the insult I believed it to be. The attention I didn't realize I required. If this story has any significance for you, have you ever been made to feel inferior? I want you, whether you're invisible or not good enough, to understand that you're never alone and that we should all be seated at the table. But if they refuse to give you room, create your own and have faith in me. If this video is shown, people will come. Struck a chord with you, kindly hit like. Share it. It's more helpful than you might think. With a person who should hear it right now, and whether you're new to this place or if you feel something genuine in this narrative, we provide the channel with narratives that issue, and yours could be the next to drop a "Have you ever had a garage?" Leave a remark below. Moment or a period of time when everything was different, I read everyone without expecting to. And I appreciate hearing from you, observing and participating in something larger.